The growth and prosperity of the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts are closely tied to the growth and prosperity of the Latino community.
We're the fastest growing population in this nation and this state. When you look at our workforce, we're young.
We also have about 30,000 Latino-owned businesses contributing on an annual basis $4.2 billion in revenue to the Commonwealth and creating close to 30,000 jobs.
The mission of the Latino Equity Fund is to use our platform to galvanize philanthropists, donors, and funders to better understand Latinx issues in the state.
Our equity agenda is to improve lives and strengthen communities, and all of our equity funds support that mission.
It's not just about giving money. It's about educating others about this population, about both their challenges and opportunity. What the Latino Equity Fund needs now is more allies and champions.
It's imperative that we properly harness the power and the promise of the Latino population in Massachusetts.
My hope is that the Latino Equity Fund can continue to do their social justice and equity work with the support of the at-large community in Boston and people like you.
I think the next generation of Latinos has something to say, and it's time that we listen.
All right, good, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for being here. And thank you for letting me sort of showcase a little bit about the Latino Equity Fund through that really great and fun video. So thank you to the service providers, community partners, students, civic leaders, and corporate allies, and everyone joining us virtually this morning. Thank you for being here. The Boston Foundation team, thank you so much, especially our event staff who've coordinated over or almost 100 events this year. And thank you for making today possible. And if this is your first time here at the Boston Foundation, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Javier Juarez. I serve as the executive director of the Latino Equity Fund here at the Boston Foundation. And, I won't pretend that these past few months haven't been incredibly difficult for Latinos, for communities of color, or immigrant communities more broadly. We've felt the weight of policy threats, budget cuts, and narratives that try to erase our worth. But in times like these, I turn to the words of someone who reminds me why we continue to push forward, right? And that's Cesar Chavez. He's a civil rights leader, icon, labor union organizer. And he once said, when social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate a person who has learned how to read. You cannot humiliate a person who feels pride. And you cannot oppress people who are no longer afraid. And that's the spirit that we bring into the space today. Our goal is simple but powerful, is to educate and uplift the contributions of the immigrant community and to empower every one of us to take meaningful action. We have a rich agenda ahead, starting with key findings from our new report, developed in partnership with the Gaston Institute and its researchers at UMass Boston. And we're going to be followed by a panel of advocates and experts who've dedicated their careers to expanding the opportunity for immigrant communities across the Commonwealth. But before we dive into that presentation, I want to welcome a key partner in this work, Andre Green, Executive Director of SkillWorks here at the Boston Foundation. Andre brings with him a timely and important policy update that speaks directly to the challenges and opportunities we're discussing today, and we're grateful for his leadership. Andre.
Thank you. I want to thank Javier for the opportunity to co-sponsor this event. My name is Andre Green. I'm the Executive Director of SkillWorks. SkillWorks is the workforce development arm of the Boston Foundation. And the reality, of course, is that in Massachusetts, if we're talking about workforce, we're talking about foreign-born workers. There are currently 140,000 foreign-born workers in Massachusetts who are either or underemployed, which means that we are not fully taking advantage of the rich depth of skills, talent, and experience they bring to the Commonwealth every day. One of the largest barriers creating that challenge for them is, of course, lack of access to English. And while Massachusetts spends relative to the country a good amount of money on English, we don't spend nearly enough, which is why there's 25,000 people currently on wait lists in Massachusetts for ESOL. 70% of those people are on those wait lists because they want the English language to get a better job. So we, in conjunction with actually many of you in this audience, coalition of some 40 plus organizations, several research groups, and a number of foundations, have put together a coalition in support of an act to promote economic mobility through ESOL. Today, by coincidence, that bill, at least in the Senate 1326, is facing its hearing before the Labor and Workforce Development Committee. So many of us, including myself, will be leaving directly from here to head to the State House to testify in support of ESOL. We would love it if you could join, if those of you who have some flexibility in schedule could join us. This bill would both create, for the first time, a coordinated ability system to bring all of the ESOL programs together towards shared purpose and shared goals, as well as investing $13 million, particularly in what we call vocational ESOL. That's the ESOL whose goal it is to help people find and keep good career jobs. For those of you who may not know this, we know that ESOL training is correlated with a 29% increase in weekly wages. If we were to expand that to 10,000 new people, so cutting that wait list almost in half, over 10 years, the Commonwealth would see $1.7 billion in new wages. And those are the workers. Without foreign workers, Massachusetts workforce is shrinking, which means the Massachusetts economy will shrink. So this is the definition of a win-win. And in these, let's be honest, dark times, there's an opportunity not only to hold the line, but to push forward for our shared values. I hope you can join us. If you cannot join us, written testimony, and I want to be clear, written testimony can be as short as, please expand ESOL. That can be your testimony. That is helpful. And you can submit that testimony by June 24th at 5 p.m. via email to labor.workforce.development@gmail.com. Thank you all for your support. I'm so glad to be supporting this report. The stories you're going to hear today are vital. And without no further ado, let's get to it, Javi.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you to the coalition leading today's legislative hearing. So at the end of the event, we'll gather at the lobby and head together. But now let's get started. To walk us through today's report, please welcome Senior Research Associate at the Gaston Institute, Philip Granberry. Philip.
First, I'd like to note that this is a research team, and I heard the term senior, but I'm lucky at the Gaston Institute to, over the number of years, to work with a large number of graduate students and undergraduate students who do research. And so this process was truly a team process, and seldom at the Gaston Institute do we get a chance to do what's called mixed methods research, to do some kind of quantitative analysis with some kind of more rich contextual analysis. And we put together a team. We had the funding, and you'll see three of us up here, but I also want people in the audience, Fabian Adila Torres, and Florida, where are you, Florida? Another graduate research assistant who did immense work on this project, who are not up here today. Okay, these right here are two reports. Those are the quantitative and the qualitative analysis. We did them separately, but they informed one another. And so I'm giving the more quantitative piece here on occupational credentialing limitations, and we're going to come up with some kind of quantitative measure on a yearly basis, and we needed that because we had heard from partners in the community that we have problems with people taking these classes who are not working. We actually had someone come and work with us for over a year to try to come up with a methodology. We finally had this opportunity, and this is, an opportunity to say how many. Many people can do the contextual analysis, which has already been done before, not to limit what's been done here, but this is actually trying to put a number on this population. Okay, so here is our findings. So we do a survey, and we have this term called occupational credentialing. Occupational credential is some kind of verification of an individual's qualifications to competently complete their work. It's often issued by government, but not always. So sometimes it's a state teacher's license, but it also can be for a nail salon, right? It can be a wide range that the government does. Also, there's all these times you see people's names and we have letters after them. Well, those are oftentimes by some kind of professional association that has some kind of level that does this. And so there's a lot of ways that we have and a lot of different occupations that require these certifications. And basically, I like it because if I hire someone, that tells me that person has the qualifications to do the job. I'm also employed. I like it because it keeps people from competing for my job, right? So there's a double-edged sword here. And so we oftentimes hear that we have a labor shortage in Massachusetts, and so we're showing you one of the reasons why we do. And so our first slide here you see is of our survey, 301 people, we collected these data over a 6-month window in 2024, and of our 301 survey respondents, 54.5% were currently employed. So these are people who are employed in Massachusetts. And so that's where that blue line is. The gray shaded you'll see is our non-response. And the most important thing here is those second colors that are shaded and that boxed in 42.7%. So this means their education and skills do not match their current job. So in other words, they have more skills than they are currently using for their job. And 45% are overqualified for their current job. Then of these overqualified workers who lacked occupational credentialing, now we can start to say, roughly a third have had problems or difficulties because of that. Another 35% don't have a problem because their job does not require the credentialing, and 28.7% there you see having not having problems. So again, of that percent, the people that are employed there, we see we're breaking it down here, and 33.5% of those people that are having problems in the labor market are directly having problems in the labor market because of this occupational credentialing. And then we were able to break it down for a number of different characteristics. We weren't able to do some analysis in this, but because we have a smaller sample size, we're not able to break it down on a lot of different areas. You can see in the report where we do, but I kind of give you a quick overview here that of that 33.5%, that directly have problems from occupational credentialing, slightly more female than male, right? Our sample is predominantly Latino, but we see it's both Latino and non-Latino. And you see that 43.8%, the highest there, is for people with higher levels of education. So I want to be very clear, skills and occupational credentialing are for a wide range, but it's a little bit more for people with higher levels of educational attainment. And then, now what's keeping people from getting their credential? You see the largest there is cost. So in other words, these are people that are working. There has to be preparation. I went to graduate school and I took one of those classes because I wanted to score well on that test so that I could go to graduate school, right? It's things of cost like that. It's a complex process that people don't understand, and there's no one explaining how to do the process. And then, as we've seen with the English language ability, half of the population had problems with English, and another half there, also having problems with lack of information. Next, we then just look at, in general, what are the issues that people are having in the labor market. Okay, and so first of all, I'd like to draw our attention to the bottom. Believe it or not, I usually don't do that, but it's not. People know how to use the computer. People have internet access. even childcare, which you'd think would be, a problematic for keeping people, especially out of the labor market, actually is not. What we see, the largest, biggest problems are with English language skills, work documents. So in other words, we have a foreign-born population in the United States that and this could be people with refugee status. This could be people with H-1B visas that have a spouse that are not able to work, needing work documents. And then we have more job experience there. So you see smaller and smaller. So it's basically problems in the labor market then, in general then, are language and work documents. Next, it was probably, from my perspective, it was something exciting because it's something that it was a little bit of a challenge, and we tried to do is how many people are we talking about, right? And we have numbers, but we want to tie it to some kind of methodology, and I'm going to quickly show you one slide and talk about the methodology here. So you see that 33.5% is the percentage of people who are currently working who had difficulties getting to credential. Remember, I was walking you down that number, and so we then looked at our sample. We're talking about people 18 to 54. That was I didn't show you the age range, but that was the biggest age range, and so we go to the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey does a 5-year and a 1-year. This is census questions, and we looked at foreign-born workers arriving in the United States in the past 5 years, and we used the 18 to 22 ACS, ages 18 to 54, and then we find that number to be 67,181, okay? And then we multiply that. This is the key that we needed the survey for. What is that number that are the percentage that are having problems? That 33.5%. And so over that 5-year window, 60 months, in Massachusetts, this estimates there were 22,500 people. Well, we're interested in, what's that? Let's break it down to 1 year. And 1 year, that's roughly, as you see on the slide, 4,500 people. So every year, 4,500 people in Massachusetts, are confronting issues with occupational credentialing. So their productivity is not being maximized, and it's not being maximized because of what we have here in our state. Most of this credentialing is state level, but there are other levels as well. So that winds up our first part here. I want to turn this over next to Maria Acheida and also Jonathan Vega Martinez, who did the qualitative parts of this research.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. Good morning. I'm now going to give a bit of a face to some of the statistics Phil was talking about. So translated to English, the title of our qualitative portion of this project is They Have Wings, but They Cannot Use Them. So this really sheds more light into the stories of immigrants that are highly qualified but find themselves unable to use their qualifications to soar professionally here in our state. So the original problem we encountered, or something that we uncovered during our project, was a framing issue in how we define credentialing. So at first, when we started this project, we framed the problem as a lack of pathways for recredentialing for immigrants. But after speaking with our participants, we realized that a more accurate framing would be that these pathways exist, but they are hidden behind inaccessible information, complex bureaucracies, and everyday life circumstances that many immigrants face. So this isn't just a policy issue, but it's a lived reality issue, something that our immigrants live and confront in their everyday lives. So to uncover how these stories progress over time, we use two methods. We use narrative analysis and root cause analysis. So the purpose behind these choices, we didn't want to only look at how immigrants told their stories, but we really want to understand what their stories meant. Deep down, understand what their stories meant and try to come to a root cause or understand the underlying consequences and systemic issues behind the stories they were telling us and how that connects to the broader issue of recredentialing or lack of credentialing here in Massachusetts. We wanted to bring meaning to these stories because that's one of the ways we think is best to enact change, not just numbers. So, well, as Phil was saying, there are many ways or many factors that influence the credentialing process here in Massachusetts. These were some of the 6 main factors we identified, both internal forces and external forces. We'll briefly go by one of each, but if you want more detail in how all these forces are affecting the recredentialing problem in our state, there are copies of the executive summary here today, and you can also scan the QR code. So to uncover more nuanced meanings about what affects credentialing in Massachusetts, we conducted in-depth interviews with highly credentialed immigrants to uncover the internal and external forces that shape their experiences. So as we see here in this quote, I fell into a depression. 1, because at work, my coworkers were not empathetic to me. Sometimes they treated me badly. Sometimes they bossed themselves, wouldn't try to help. Coworkers wouldn't help either. I suffered, you could say, a little bit of labor exploitation because it was very stressful working so many hours with such minimal pay, doing such heavy labor. On top of that, I arrived very skinny. I couldn't eat well. My body rejected food. A lot of people were saying that food is like that because sometimes you end up with a stomachache when you eat. In my case, I just threw it up. I started to be able to start eating here after about 2 months because what I could eat here was fruits and water. After some time, I got used to that. I think it was a stress of moving. I don't know. A female respondent shared this anecdote, this story with us. So managing change in the U.S. was one of the internal forces that many highly credentialed immigrants face when they arrive to the U.S. So this force relates or is defined as the adaptability to the U.S., to their move here to this country, comes with a cost. Participants described how the pressures of adapting to change in the U.S. to this new life sometimes came with emotional distress, isolation, and even physical symptoms. As we see in this quote, it really reflects how navigating a new country, labor market, and adapting to a new identity of sorts can take a heavy toll on an immigrant. And recredentialing, as we can see in this example, isn't just a bureaucratic hurdle, but instead it's embedded in a broader structure that immigrants seek as they struggle and survive to make a life and rebuild themselves here in the United States and rebuild their journeys. I'm now going to turn it to my colleague and friend Johnny, who's going to go over through an external force that immigrants face while adapting to life in the U.S. and the recommendations for our project. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Johnny, Jonathan Vega Martinez, the other half of the qualitative research team. Apologies if I cough during the presentation. Allergies are really rough this year. So, yeah, okay. Sorry. So, when it comes to the obstacles faced by immigrants seeking to re-enter their careers, the credentialing process being one is probably pretty obvious. However, in our findings, we found that how we had conceptualized credentialing as an obstacle was itself incorrect. We presupposed that the issue with credentialing was time and money. And while those are issues for immigrants, particularly immigrants in the healthcare sector, oftentimes the biggest issue was access to information about the process. Some immigrants were unaware that they needed to get their credentials validated. Others were unclear of how to get their credentials validated. And those who were able to identify organizations capable of credential validation were confronted with an inscrutable process that often left them feeling disoriented. And this disorientation is actually pretty important because one of the things we found was that one of our other findings was about aspirational capital. These are people who are motivated, who are ambitious, who view themselves a certain way. And so this inscrutability, this disorientation can conflict with that. And so I have a quote from one of our respondents, a female social worker. This is about credential validation. It's accessible, but it's not very intelligible. It's not very clear because all you do is enter the webpage of the organization and they say, you need to fill out this first form and we will let you know if you can proceed to the second stage. Then after the second stage, they might say, we need these documents. But there's not a person that's advising you, that is guiding you, that is helping you in the process. It's more like you do everything yourself and you try to understand it. This lack of transparency in the credentialing process leads to disruptions as immigrants may attempt to complete the various processes out of order or find themselves scrambling to obtain documents before an unexpected deadline, which was something that came up a few times. Like, particularly when they got hired, they'd be like, oh, we want to hire you, but we need you to provide us with these credentials. They didn't know that. And so now they're scrambling to get things validated. And so from our findings, we have crafted 4 recommendations, which should be understood as a plan of action altogether that tries to address holistically the issues these immigrants have. Our first recommendation is for a statewide clearinghouse to serve as a repository of credentialing information. So one of the biggest obstacles faced by immigrants is access to information. They just you don't know what you don't know, right? So the good thing about this recommendation, it is doable in the short term. It is easy to do, low stake, doesn't require many resources, but ultimately can have a high impact. So this repository should be multilingual and needs to be maintained and updated so that it remains useful to immigrants, right? And it would serve as a place to find information on needed credentials, credential verification processes, and licensing requirements. This tool, this could also serve as a tool for potential employers, as oftentimes the complexity of the credentialing process itself leads employers to not hire immigrants. Our second recommendation is for a strengthening of state relationships with community-based and nonprofit organizations to develop support programs for immigrants. So a holistic approach is needed to aid with career reentry. And this is what's really going to do that. And this is a long-term strategy. So housing, food, health, income, all of these impact an immigrant's ability to re-enter their careers. Local immigrations already have access to these communities, and they have a wealth of information, expertise that the state doesn't always tap into. So it's really important for the state to become involved to support these organizations, create centralized resources and communication networks to help these communities to help these organizations aid immigrants. And it'll help avoid redundancies in the process and gaps in aid where there are. So our third recommendation is the development and implementation of professional English courses. This is midterm goal, right? There is varying need for English proficiency in the professional field. Some require less, others it is sufficient to be fluent. Many fields have technical jargon. And so immigrants have expressed a need for courses to help them with professional English, help them learn the jargon of their field so that they can re-enter. So funding for ESL programs needs to be expanded to meet current needs. And in addition, we need to create these professional English courses. And importantly, these professional English courses can double as a place to educate immigrants on the uniqueness of the American labor market. That was another issue we found. Immigrants are coming from cultures where they might not be competing with as many people for a position. And in the US, there are hundreds and hundreds of people applying for positions, and that leads companies to develop these strategies about what is a good resume, what is a good candidate, whose applications are we looking at and whose aren't we. Our last recommendation is expanding funding for research that enhances support for immigrant career reentry. So this should be an ongoing process to be done in conjunction with previous recommendations to plan, evaluate, and modify previous recommendations, right? These are not problems that, you can put a Band-Aid over it and it's done. We need to create these solutions, and then we need to maintain them. Research needs to be done on other stakeholders, including employers, professional organizations, local organizations, and immigrant advocacy groups. See what are other needs, what are other ways we can help immigrants re-enter their careers. And then again, it's important to emphasize the importance of looking at immigrants' experiences holistically. An immigrant working 2 jobs due to high cost of living and an immigrant experiencing illness without access to health care cannot focus on career reentry. And so lastly, we have this intended timeline. While implementing some of these recommendations is better than implementing none, it's important to highlight that these recommendations are intended to be implemented together as a plan of action. This timeline shows how they fit together with short, mid, and long-term goals, all of which are supported by ongoing research, right? So immediately, research starts on the development of the clearinghouse, which can be implemented very quickly, right? It's just collecting information and creating a repository. And then ongoing evaluation and maintenance. The same for the launch of professional and English courses, and the same for the implementation of resources. So next, I'd like to introduce Lorna Rivera, Director of the Gaston Institute at Massachusetts, who will be the moderator for our panel. And then after the panel, we will have a Q&A session.
But, good morning, buenos dias. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today for this important report and discussion. I wanted to introduce now our panel, and I'll call them up when I introduce them. So I would really pleased to welcome to our stage Claudia Green, who is the Executive Director of English for New Bostonians. Yay, Claudia. Also want to welcome Eva Milona, who is a Foundation Fellow at the Eastern Bank Foundation and a Visiting Fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And then I want to welcome Nikki Nesbeth, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Youth Club. Welcome. So we have some questions for the panelists, and then we will open it up to the wider audience. And so I think my mic is working over here. Is that right? Yes, you can hear me okay? Yep, okay, great. So I wanted to ask for a response from all of you to this question about, tell us a little bit more about the organization that you represented, and also an interesting project that you're working on this year that's related to this topic. Would you like to go first?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. First, let me just say thank you to Javier and the Latino Fund for their leadership and bringing us together, to the Boston Foundation. And it's wonderful to be part of this amazing panel. But I also wanted to give a shout out to each and every one of you for the amazing work that you do every day to promote and enhance immigrant integration. I've been in the field of advocating for and promoting immigrant integration for over 2 decades as a former MIRA executive, as a former Biden administration official working on immigrant integration, and now I have the privilege of representing Eastern Bank that has been investing for a long time in immigrant integration in the workforce, in affordable housing, as well as early childhood development and small business development. I'm very excited to share with you that the foundation is announcing pretty soon a multi-year, multi-million campaign focusing on career-focused English. And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to talk more about it, but this is really recognizing the need for English language. This is, we heard our researchers and this report also make the case how important it is to have the career-focused English and support 28% of our workforce in Massachusetts is foreign-born and foreign-trained, and over 140,000 untapped talented here. So I'm very happy to be part of the foundation, being part of this work, and looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Yes, Nikki.
Hi, nice to have you all here this morning. And in spite of the drizzle and the terrible traffic, we all made it. So it's a blessing to be here. So I launched the Caribbean Youth Club almost 15 years ago because I am an immigrant, like many of us represented here. And one of the challenges I had as a child coming here from Jamaica was just not having a place to help us with the acculturation process. And even listening to the quote earlier about not being able to eat the food, it's such a huge transition, and food is life. And coming to a place where you can't even adjust to the food except for long after. For other people it might not seem like something big, but it was huge. So that's kind of that experience, that lived experience, that made me want to launch the Caribbean Youth Club, because there wasn't really a culture-specific youth program for Afro-Caribbean youth in Boston. And we wanted to launch something that would help them right at the point as where they're coming in. We partnered with actually 6 high schools across the city of Boston to have support groups in the schools. And then from there it grew and went on to, we went on to do more work with resettlement, and we started out doing youth, but for the past year we ran a shelter in the Seaport District, and we, went from doing resettlement support services for youth for full families. So it was that lived experience that brought me to this space of launching a nonprofit for Afro-Caribbean youth. And in terms of my work, I'm heading to the State House when this event concludes. And separate and apart from that, in terms of workforce development, I have in 2023, we launched a project called the Immigrant Workforce Development Initiative in partnership with my lovely community partner, raise your hand, Ivana. Beautiful Afro-Latina back there that helped us to provide training and support services for immigrants wanting to go into weatherization and green jobs. And it was extremely challenging because even getting into something as technical as learning weatherization wasn't easy. There were many language challenges that surfaced, but but it also yielded great results. So this conversation that we're having here is quite timely. Turning over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here on this panel of people that I've worked with for more years than I care to say at the Gaston Institute, the Mirror Coalition, and very happy and pleased to be working with Nikki now in this in the Economic Stability through ESOL Coalition, through English for a Strong Economy. I take that back. We just renamed. At English for New Bostonians, I want to say about this report. I'm so happy that this work has happened, and I dare say I think that it came from previous collaboration with the Gaston Institute of research. We did a couple rounds of research called a report that we called Talking Jobs, in which we asked students who were in ESOL programs about their employment, about what they had done in their home country, about what they're doing now, and what their goals were, what they really hope to be doing, and also about if their employers knew about whether they were enrolled in English classes and whether they knew about other people who needed English classes. Answers being not really and yes, of course, to those last 2 questions. But what we found was, the gap between what people had done in their home country, what they were doing now, and what they really wanted to be doing, those gaps were huge, right? So, an architect sweeping floors, a scientist making smoothies, you name it. Those gaps, as we compared the data and the responses, they were huge. And so we find that anytime I will challenge any of you involved in the ESOL field or who visit an ESOL class, that when you walk into a class, except for those very specialized classes that Johnny was talking about, that you will find people who may, someone with, a graduate degree, a bachelor's degree, sitting, in the same class, or has professional experience in their home country, but next to others in the classes who have a limited, formal education, and so, and are learning in the same place and, in the same environment, but are not necessarily getting the most customized service. So, our work is to elevate immigrant voices. I just want to quote from our mission that what we do is to, English for New Bostonians ensures access to high quality English classes so immigrants across race, education, migratory background can pursue their aspirations and contribute to a Commonwealth that fully values their talents and voices. So that really, that encompasses the work that we're talking about here. We support 24 ESOL programs in the city of Boston. We also partner with employers to bring English classes to their employees. Last year we worked at 14 of the emergency assistance shelters, bringing classes to folks who are trying to move out of the shelter and get employment and move out of the shelter. So if I have time for one quick, just to say, we are one of the evolutions of our organization, in addition to supporting with funding and technical assistance, et cetera, to ESL programs. One change for us is that we're doing more direct career coaching. We have a career coaching program that we call our Immigrant Economic Resiliency Initiative. And I think one of our coaches is here in the room. There she is. Two of our career coaches, awesome, are here in the room. And I also want to just give a shout out to Franklin Peralta, who worked on those reports that I mentioned over the two rounds of those reports, and also did a lot of the outreach to programs and students for this report. And his work is always much valued.
Thank you. So in the report, which you can download, and we saw maybe just 2 quotes, right, in the earlier presentation, but there are so many stories about, immigrants feeling grounded. So I want to invite folks to read the report and see some of those stories. But I wondered if some of our panelists could share some stories that illustrate those disconnects between, these skills and the recognition. I thought maybe Nikki, maybe you can share a story.
Sure, I'd love to speak to that. I actually went to college with a lot of seasoned educators from the Caribbean. And these educators, once they arrived in America, they couldn't teach anymore. And it was interesting because they were all educated under the British system, which is not just accepted here in America. It's typically revered when they're coming directly from the UK. But coming from the same British education, but now when they're coming from the Caribbean, and you add the element of race to it, all of a sudden the same British education, which would be revered at higher institutions of higher education all across, because it comes with the British accent instead of the Afro-Caribbean accent, they're saying, oh, it's no good anymore. So I've watched teachers, seasoned educators, principals come, and I'm sitting next to them in classrooms when I was in my 20s. And it was really unfortunate, but they either had to make the decision to start over again and be re-credentialed according to American standards, or they would just kind of move out of education. And typically they were moving away from education. So you can see these folks who had so many years, 10, 20 years worth of classroom experience from back home, just moving out of education altogether, and would get jobs working, you know, all of the survival jobs, either in a hospital in dietary aid, or, you know, working in cleaning or some other survival job. But it was a loss. I see it as a tremendous loss to us as a Commonwealth to have so many people coming in with these kinds of credentials and not being able to leverage them to help advance education and, you know, whatever the other fields are in our state. And, but, you know, looking at kind of how we receive people coming from, you know, I would call it sometimes often the global South, right? It's always met with bigotry, because again, even when you're looking at folks coming from the Europe with the same, which is where the credentials are from, even to this day, if you go across the Caribbean, our departments of education are still tied and seriously, intrinsically tethered to the British education system. In Jamaica, all of our exams for the A and O levels are still printed in England, created, printed, and just administered on Caribbean soil, but they're not accepted here. But if you have people who take the same exact exams in Britain and come here, they're accepted. So you see, it's really it's really race and culture at play. And it's unfortunate because it's keeping so many qualified people out of the workforce.
Wow. Thank you for that. I didn't know if maybe another panelist wanted to share a story.
Well, I can briefly share my own story. I'm also an immigrant, and English is my fourth language. I came from Eastern Europe, had a JD, And I had to start over, going back to graduate school and learning professional English and learning the English that was spoken here. I grew up under dictatorship and learned English in the system that, from professionals who never went overseas or learned themselves or learned, without being in a place where the language was spoken. So the challenges are humongous. And this gathering today and this report really speaks to what needs to be done. And my story and the story that my colleagues are sharing are the stories of millions naturalized citizens and refugees and green card holders and others holding different statuses who are very much part of this fabric, are very much part of this workforce. They want to learn, they are eager to contribute. And the receiving society, all of us together providing the resources, those recommendations that our researchers shared with us today are really key. And I would argue not long-term and mid-term, but an immediate need to really address those issues, the access to information, but also investment and streamlining those processes and making sure that all benefit, because when immigrants succeed, we all do better.
I wanted to ask Claudia and then maybe others to talk a little bit about, we're here at the Boston Foundation, right? So what do you think is the role of philanthropy in addressing some of these challenges that we've been discussing? And also, where are there opportunities for more resources to help immigrants access these important credentials?
Yeah. Well, and thank you to the Boston Foundation and to Eastern Bank, because both these organizations have been, long time supporters of this work. Boston Foundation for us was one of the, we're one of those there at the beginning organizations that the Boston Foundation has been supporting since our start in 2001. So it was named here, it was, well, actually, let me start with one thing, which I think, if all things were working well, it would be like when someone comes to this country, there would be a way for them to say, here's who I am, and here's what I need, here's what I want to do, and and what do I need to get there? Here's what I need to get there. And then they'd be, someone would be there to help them with a voucher for a certain amount of, of training or classes to get where they want to go. It would be so much more clear. Right? Just check in here. And that's not so unrealistic. That is more what some European countries do, that offer newly arrived people coming that, get a voucher for a couple of years to go in the direction to get where they need to go and to be able to fully contribute. But that is not the case here. So just to say, if all things were going well, I think that would be a start. And can philanthropy support that? I think at a localized level, philanthropy could support something like that. I also, the being able to supporting both high level, advanced level English classes, but also customized English classes for professionals. So we support 4 classes. English for New Bostonians supports 4 classes like that that are at the Y and the Asian American Civic Association, I believe, that are specifically for folks like that to help them get the language skills, but also do a reboot in their field and discover, learn about the field, interact with professionals in their field, so that they can get move forward. So it's supporting high level and customized classes. I will say that the state only supports English levels up to National Reporting Service up to level 6 out of 10. So there's not funding for those high level English classes. I think the biggest thing is and we're putting some resources into this. These are 2 of our 3 multilingual career coaches that are working. So I would say coaching. I think that it's not just, it's the information repository will be super helpful, but I think it's also that individualized working with someone to say, what is your experience? What skills do you have? Where do you want to go? And how do you get there? And really taking the time, and that's labor and resource and cost intensive, but I think that is like one of the most important things where we can support foreign-born professionals getting their restart here. I think mentorships, internships, and it's like long-term patient funding. The outcomes aren't coming like that, but it's having the time and the resources to work one-on-one with people and to help people envision that it's not just because you're an immigrant doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life working in the back of a house restaurant. That you have a future that looks different.
Thank you. Eva, do you want to add anything to this question? Being a fellow with the Eastern Bank Foundation, what can philanthropy do?
Well, the role of philanthropy, it's really critical, and especially in this very challenging time when the states need to step in because integration, it's a local issue, and work together for the betterment and a healthy workforce. So foundations, number one, can really provide strategic convening, such as the one that we are participating today, bringing multiple sector representation and really talking strategically about the future of the workforce. And I'm referring to the workforce and credentialing as the topic of the day today. As Claudia mentioned, providing the resources to really enhance impact, it's one great thing, but being a thought partner and being a partner in this effort, it's another one. The importance of funding research, I think that it's key because data really helps inform policy, and I'm glad that many of you will go to the State House to testify for this, for the Senate bill, which is really key for the future of the workforce. Also, building strategic alliances and partnership, it's really key. Providing a forum for bringing together public and private resources and playing that role in supplementing as well. And also funding being a strategic partner in formulating the narrative. I think we are dealing with, immigrants are being portrayed as a problem, as a national security risk, as undermining the economy. And I think we need to get back that narrative and tell the great story that this report started on many other reports in the past, that foreign-born and foreign-trained workers are part of the solutions, are not part of the problem. And I think philanthropy can use the resources and the power of convening, bringing the right partners to tell the right story.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to turn to Nikki about this next question. How does underutilizing foreign-trained professionals affect these workforce shortages in specific sectors, like healthcare, engineering? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a great question. I come from a family of 5 nurses, and typically when I'm in the room, if there are enough Afro-Caribbeans there, we usually number somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 nurses. And it is because we come from a culture where nursing and fields where you care for others is important. And I think this is a huge missed opportunity for us as a Commonwealth, because especially in nursing care, you're starting to see now as the American population ages, there's more of a need for even nursing home type of care. And it's almost kind of like, not beneficial. It's not beneficial in any way, but it's almost contradictory to what we say our needs are, to not fully utilize the skills of the people who are coming and who have a propensity and an interest in going into particular fields, when the needs are showing that kind of worker is needed, but not just needed, but urgently needed. And going forward, if we're not necessarily bringing enough people into certain fields, that there's going to be a crisis. Right? The average white American now is 60 years old. Nursing care, especially in this particular state, is kind of the future of where a lot of our work is going to be. Not even necessarily just in the hospitals, because I think we do turn out, again, thanks to the immigrants, enough nurses. But even when you look at the deficit in the nursing care space, we need to attract and train and credential as many people, because we're all getting older. This is just life. And we need to put mechanisms in place so that as people age and as our population age, they can get the care and age with dignity that they deserve and have support in a state where I think we have the intelligence and the skills to do better.
I wanted to ask all of you to speak to this next question. So what role should state agencies, higher education, industry partners, what role should they play in streamlining this credentialization? What incremental policy steps can foster progress? Would you like to begin?
Sure. I would like to start addressing that by telling a story. It was 15 years ago, I believe, when I was working at MIRA, and we came in this very room. Boston Foundation was one of the conveners. Deval Patrick was the governor, and there was an initiative launched for the first time called the New Americans Agenda. And many of the issues that we are talking today were part of that report that came and really put Massachusetts in the national map, because it became a national issue that states need to come up with a state plan addressing these issues when all stakeholders work together. And one of the themes 15 years ago was the credentialing and what can we do for the foreign trained professionals and especially physicians. As part of that effort, there was a bill introduced to create a commission to bringing all stakeholders together to see what we can do for physicians and address the needs in the underserved areas. And only last year, Governor Healy signed the Physicians Pathway Act that really provides a path for foreign trained physicians to practice in underserved areas, being under supervision for 3 years. And so that's the story of how long it takes to make the change, but how important it is to work together in partnership to bring the right alliances together, and especially the business community being part of this and being a voice as well. So the working together, the collaboration, the data to support it, the story and the narrative, and keeping in mind that things take time, but change is possible, and that working together, it's stronger. It's stronger working together to get results.
So for me, this one is I see it as just a simple structural change that needs to happen. If we're serious about making any progress, right, it's not enough to kind of have it in mind that it's something we want to do. We have to build structures in place to allow that kind of change to materialize. So I think at the state agencies and even in education circles, we need to create kind of an office of credentialing, right? So a kind of a liaison or a director or a chief of sorts that will allow that, because if we're intentional about it, we will create space even within our actual formal legislative, administrative structures rather, for it to happen consistently. So that it's not something that we do, and then if there's no funding, we're not doing it. It's something that we have to be serious about. And it's something that would, and of course, in addition to kind of a depot or warehouse where folks can come and get this information, it's where we can begin to build systems and kind of workforce around making sure that people can get that. That needs to be one of the things that we're funding consistently at the state level and among our philanthropic partners and at our community level. This is also, and then also would allow people to come in to not just get re-credentialed from, to be able to continue what they were doing home, but also to look at matches. Sometimes it's a slight modification in what they used to do something else that's equally rewarding, right? If they're not allowed to go back immediately to do the work that they were doing home, that's important. This is being done in Canada right now, and it's also being done in UK. I have a sister that lives in Canada, and they're taking all these nurses from Ghana and Nigeria, and they've figured out a way to get these folks credentialed from even when they're in Ghana. They actually apply ahead of time before they come. They take the Canadian nursing exam from there, and then once they come, they literally just need to be licensed, and then they start working immediately. So I think that we're smart enough to can do better, but we have to create formal structures to allow us to do this consistently.
And we're going to take some questions from the audience in 1 minute, but I did want to invite Claudia to respond to this.
Yeah, well, that may be a good segue. I mean, I just want to go back to, as you've heard already, this act to promote economic mobility through ESOL. And one of the really important pieces of that pending legislation is for the state to have a plan for ESOL. And that means and a strategy, which it doesn't always feel like it has. But to connecting the state agents, calling for the state agencies involved in this work, the Department of Education, Labor and Workforce Development, Health and Human Services, Economic Development, to really work together to articulate a strategy and to bring community colleges, employers, community organizations, students, immigrant serving organizations together to develop that plan. So, and this is a piece of that. And so I just want to, just shout that out again. I also want to say that one of the best examples of doing this work and involving industry partners is the African Bridge Bridge Network. And I'm glad Emmanuel is here, and I'm sure he will participate in the conversation. But they are currently doing an employer verification process for skilled immigrants to ask employers, what exactly do you need, right? So we know so many people get overlooked for their skills, and there's one reason or another that skilled professionals aren't getting hired, aren't getting into the labor market. So to really figure out what it is, and then to credential that, and once people get that credential, to be able to share that. So, and Emmanuel can talk more about that. But I think that's a great example of really sort of getting the private sector to engage and kind of put their money where their mouth is and say, how are we gonna accept people into the labor market?
Excellent, thank you so much. So we're gonna now have about 9 to 10 minutes for some questions. I'm just standing up so I can see behind the pillars here. We have our mics out here. So yes, any questions? Over here, yes.
I manage a small business development program, so I coach immigrant entrepreneurs on how to start and develop their businesses. So I'm hearing some of the asks and the recommendation for that person-to-person guidance that I see in the business development in the credentialing world. As someone who has a lot of flexibility around what my program might look like, I'm interested in learning about what Emmanuel is doing and your program is doing with job coaching in terms of what resources can I pull from to help folks find that credentialing, and are there other organizations that I could point them to? I know it's a recommendation to do something like that in the future, but right now folks are coming in my doors who have credentials, who are looking to find other careers. What can I turn to in terms of helping them out with that?
Mm-hmm. I wondered if Emmanuel would like to speak to that. Yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, Emmanuel Owusu of African Bridge Network. We work with skilled immigrants to help them leverage their foreign credentials to build career here. That's what we do. So the best thing you can do, I can give you contact, refer the people to our website, and we'll be able to take it out from there. But whilst I'm standing, let me highlight a few things. What this population is dealing with is several barriers that they are facing. And one thing I want to highlight is navigating a new culture and a new systems, right? Mm-hmm. So it is not that simple to say, okay, I give you the roadmap, and there you go, you can go on your own. It's like giving someone a math quest. As soon as they do one wrong turn, the whole printed map is useless. What this population need is a guide, someone that can be with them and walk them through. That's what Claudia was emphasizing. But we need to invest. Most time funders will not invest in that kind of work, right? And another thing I want to lift up, the gap in our system. With the new migrants that arrived last year, I keep asking the state, at least collect data of those who have college degree and hand them over to us at ABN so that we can go after those people. I never got the data. So I think we can do better structuring the pathway for this population and figure out as soon as they arrive in our state, we know who they are and we connect them to the resources. There are some resources around, just that this population don't know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I didn't know if any one of our panelists wanted to quickly respond to this coaching, or otherwise we can take another question.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Another question? Yes. Over here. And then
Hello, my name is Leonela Gonzalez Fogarty, and my organization helps small business owners and professionals to speak English with confidence. So I have the question, what programs also do you have for small business owners? You know, we have two big groups, professionals like me that came here many years ago to find better opportunities in my career. And small business owners also have a need when they're ready to grow in order to speak with confidence, to be able to successfully engage in conversations and grow their businesses. What programs do you have in that area?
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you so much for bringing that up. We actually offer a program that's called English for Immigrant Entrepreneurs, which is all about, learning English, but in context of financing your business, marketing, management, and it's really about helping business owners, entrepreneurs who may have had a business in their home country or are starting a business here for the first time. And once people many times immigrants will have a market that's in their same language group, but once they want to break out of that and reach English-speaking customers or native English-speaking customers or people who come to this country from other countries and they're communicating in English, to learn that kind of English and really to learn more about the U.S. Business environment. And I will say there are so many people in those classes who actually are professionals from their home country. And because they're not, there's not an easy transition into their career here, they decide to start a business. And in fact, one of the people who will be testifying at the State House today was an accountant in her home country, and today she's running like a party entertainment business here. Which is cool. She's making money, but that's a big change. So I would say also, Amplify Latinx does work with small businesses and Boston Impact Initiative and many others that I'm sure others here in the room could know, but those are two that come to mind.
I also wanted to add that Eastern Bank Foundation also has been investing in small business development, and I'm happy to connect you with my colleague who runs that portfolio on supporting small business development and the ecosystem that we have created and are part of. And the unique thing about Eastern Bank Foundation is that we do the work in partnership, and we are also we create coalitions of stakeholders to do this work. So happy to connect with you and connect you with my colleagues, and you can be a beneficiary of this work and investment as well.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question. Over here, yep, thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm Sandy. I work here at the Boston Foundation. I'm curious if you guys could comment on how the climate of fear is maybe depressing the people's willingness to come to an ESOL class, just out of fear that it might be targeted, and whether there's a role for volunteers to do one-on-one kind of instruction that could be safer for them.
Yeah. Well, Eva's coming from that climate of fear, so do you want to?
Well, fears are real. The changes that are happening at the federal level are really impacting not just those unauthorized, but also others who are authorized to work, and the twilight status is those who are under different statuses that some do not lead to permanent residency or naturalization. So those are, the fears are real as to what's happening, but I think many in this group and others who are offering services to all people need to do a lot of education to make sure that individuals who need those services and those services are available to them are coming forward and taking advantage of what's available for them to learn or participate in the labor market and more. So it's education, and also organizations with huge credibility and rooted in our communities need to do a lot more to make sure that those who need services are coming to a safe place. But the fears are real and the concerns are what they are, and we have seen that there is a zero tolerance policy. So, another challenge that add to the complexity of, barriers and challenges for the foreign-born workforce.
In my community, we're seeing a lot of it. My office is in the heart of Mattapan Square, which is the heart of the Afro-Caribbean community. And it's having a chilling effect. We've had a significant reduction in the amount of students that are coming to classes. And we even had mental health support group because most of our clients are recent refugees. And we've had to move our mental health classes online. They're being done over Zoom and over video now. And we've done classes over video. And we're doing just more and more virtually, which seems so contradictory because we just came out of a pandemic. But there's active intimidation in the Afro-Caribbean community. ICE is often in Mattapan Square. Just like a week ago, they were in the back of the building where we're housed, just kind of in the parking lot. And then there was the Haitian parade like 2 weeks ago, and they were there. So they're making themselves quite visible in a way to actively intimidate folks. So we are having to be more strategic in terms of how we deliver instruction. And then also because, we're really at a very dark period in our country, we've also had our clients fill out emergency action plans. Where should they get picked up? What happens to their kids that are in daycare and that are in schools? And where they need to appoint friends and family members who can have custody. So we've had a lot of them write affidavits to give custody of their children, the family and friends, in case they're picked up, because this is just where we are. And we have to prepare for the world in which we live and not the one we'd like to live in. And right now for us, it's not just about having dexterity with how we deliver instruction, but also to prepare for the worst.
Thank you so much.
I would just, everything Ava and Nikki have shared, yes, it's real. To answer sort of the second part of your question, about, can people help? I think I appreciate that question, and I know that, we started a citywide tutor program during actually the first Trump administration, and it's called Allies for Immigrants, ESOL Corps. And I will say that we definitely, there were a lot of people that wanted to figure out how to connect directly, how to step up and connect directly. And that program, we've gone through some changes, but we still have that, and it is a really important piece of that, of the work that we do to get people online. Not everyone has the digital literacy skills to learn online, and it, we don't have to talk about it. It's from the, pandemic round 2 here, or, pandemic experience round 2. So it does really help to have extra sets of hands to help people keep learning. And I know other programs here in the room have those opportunities. If you're interested, go on our website under volunteer. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, good point, Claudia, about the pandemic. I was thinking this is the political pandemic. So creating new resources and having volunteers to address it in a different way would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you so much. I'm sorry that we're running out of time, and we still want to invite Javier to come up, but I just want to give really thanks to our panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you all for the amazing work that you do. I also want to just invite the audience too to just contact us at the Gaston Institute if you have any suggestions for further research around these issues. We're always want to collaborate with our community partners to really, do research projects like this. So thank you all for coming. I want to invite Javier to come up and do some closing remarks.
Thank you. Wow, what an honor to be in this stage with you all. I admire you all individually. You all are incredible leaders in your work. So, I've been thinking a lot about, how to sort of close this gathering, this event. So first, I really want to say, thank you to the panelists for a powerful presentation. Thank you for the research team for the presentation of the report. But, if I can just have another 5 minutes of your time, I do want to circle back to what I promised at the beginning, right? That today we would learn, we would uplift the contribution of our communities, and that we would take action. I would be lying to you that if the findings of the report didn't really hit home for me. When my father and I migrated here to the United States 26 years ago, he took a job as a janitor in a building similar to this one. He couldn't afford childcare, so he would take me sometimes, and he would bring me with him, and I would help him, clean the mirrors with Windex and wipe down the sinks. And while we worked, we talked. We talked about our dreams, all the things that we want to accomplish in this country. So to this day, every time I go to the bathroom in buildings like this, I look at myself in the reflection of the mirror, and I don't just see myself. I continue to see the reflection of my father cleaning the bathrooms in the background, so one day his son could have an opportunity he never had. I didn't know it then, but I bet it took so much from him, a submarine engineer, to start over in a country, to learn the language, to take a job he's never done before, just to make ends meet. His story is unique, but it's the story of so many immigrants who come here with nothing but determination and the hope of building something better for their families. And I think that's why this work matters, and this is why this report is really important, but it's also why we must act today. Last week, Boston Magazine called out the use of elite speak at events like these here at the Boston Foundation. So let me keep it 100 and maybe say it plainly so there's no misunderstanding. Currently, our civil liberties are under threat. Immigrant communities are being destroyed. Families are being separated and torn apart. You're important. We need your help. Support the work of the Latino Equity Fund and the Boston Foundation today. Thank you.